Welcome to the channel Mentoring Moon. We are going to talk all about the lunar cycle today, and I mean the whole lunar cycle. So with that though, before we begin, I really do believe in the power of presence, and ultimately, I really believe that these tools, any tool that we use for spiritual development, is kind of lost if we're not grounded in our most present and conscious states of being. That being said, for me and for the viewer, you. So with that, I'd love to invite us into a brief 2-3 minute drop-in meditation, just to anchor in any energies, to create a field for both of us, even though we're not in the same time or space, and then we'll dive in. So I gently and encouragingly invite you to close your eyes. Maybe you roll the shoulders down the back, maybe you wiggle out anything that's been in your body, your mind, and just come into your breath. Notice how the breath enters the body, and notice how it leaves the body. Relax any muscles in the face. See if you can soften into the shoulders. Let the bones of your body hold you in whatever you are sitting on or standing on. And just bring your awareness to your breath. Notice how the breath enters the nose. And notice how the breath leaves the nose. Breathing in, breathing out. And as you notice this, just notice if there's any constriction or tension in the body. And send the breath and your awareness there. With your next inhale, follow the breath in through the nose, through the passages, and down into the throat. Sometimes I like to place a hand here. And just take a couple breaths, breathing in through the nose, down into the throat, fully arriving deeper into the body. And with the next inhale, once again, through the nose, down through the throat, this time to the heart space. Noticing how the breath fills up the lungs, how there's buoyancy in the chest. And with each exhale, just settle down deeper into the bones of your body. On the next inhale, breathing in through the nose, drop down through the chest and into the solar plexus or the navel. And breathe deeply here. And finally, dropping the breath and the awareness, maybe even the hands down onto the hips, the womb space for those that have one. Breathing down all the way deep into the pelvic bowl. And with each inhale, feeling the subtle buoyancy, and with each exhale, softening, releasing, being held by whatever it is you're sitting on. From this space, as you breathe in, imagine you could breathe all the way up through the base of the spine, through the entire length of the spine, and out the top of the head. So just a couple breaths like that, breathing in from the depths of you. Exhale, let it go. Just a few more. Making any sounds you need to make so that you fully arrive in your body. And then gently opening the eyes if they're not already. Welcome to my channel, Mentoring Moon, where I get to do what I love, talk about the moon and share it with people. So quick thing about me and why I want to do this anyway is, well, I'm just obsessed with the moon. I've been obsessed with the moon since I was a small child. I just always looked up at her, could see her glow, always felt comforted. And as I grew up and moved out and became an adult, life got really lacklustery. And then I discovered the moon again. And now I host women moon circles. I help clients dismantle limiting beliefs through the container of a lunar cycle. And it's just been really magnificent, not only to see the transformation and change in my own clients, but also in my own life. I've been working with the moon, I don't know, for 2024 now? Almost 5.5 years consciously. This moon work really deepened for me during the pandemic when I lived alone. And ever since then, it's been really dear to my heart. And so I'm just super, super excited to be sharing it more in the world. So with that, let's get into it. I really wanted to start this channel off with a video on understanding the whole lunar cycle, because in the spaces and the circles that I'm in, which are wonderful and they have given me so much, I noticed that there's a tendency to reduce the lunar cycle to 2 days, the new moon and the full moon. And while, there's so much fun that can be had on those days, and while I myself host ceremonies on those days, there's so much more nuance to the entire cycle, and so much is lost if we're not grounded in why we show up on the new moon and why we show up on the full moon. If we're not really giving ourselves over to the entire lunar cycle that is available to us. The moon symbolically represents our feminine side. And when I say feminine, I just mean the more receptive, still, yin, dark, night symbols of our psyche, rather than being a female. But that's something for another time. Anyways, so the moon really has this intuitive draw. And if you're here, likely you've already been drawn to the moon, just like I have, just like many people have, just like we've all been over time as the world turns. The moon has this mysterious magic about it. And it's not magic in the sense that it makes us do something. It's magic in the sense that it reawakens, it reminds us of who we are, and it gives us that little stirring, that little spark within us if we've been gone from ourselves for too long. It's just this subtle hey, I see you. And it feels so nourishing. There's this wild essence about it. There's this deeper draw to what the moon represents in our, not only in our collective stories, but just in our own personal lives. So I encourage you, before you even dive into, especially if you're new to moon work, before you even dive into the lunar cycle, what is it that drew you to the cycle? What is it that drew you to the moon? What is it that stirs within you that wants to be awakened? Because just in that question alone, you will find so many beautiful answers to whatever it is you're trying to create or be in your life. But with that, let's get into the lunar cycle. So it's a 29.5 day cycle. in the way that I teach it, I start day 1 on the new moon. And day 1 slowly waxes over 2 weeks into the full moon, and then 2 weeks it wanes back into the new moon. And so there's this beautiful circular cycle. That's why it's called a cycle, right? And the great thing about it is, you know, we get to journey through one cycle and then we get to start again. And I think that's just so incredible, because instead of teaching this, what's the word that I'm looking for? Instead of teaching this structure of A to B to B to C, it's more of like this spherical, cyclical, spherical cycle that really allows us to get beyond, you know, what we think is the right way to do something. And so the moon really just encourages us to find our rhythms, and it's always there in the sky, despite whatever phase it's in. And that's what I love most about the moon. Even though we can't see it when it's in a new moon, it's still there, and it's still full. You know, the moon actually isn't like ever going through phases as much as the light that's reflecting on the moon is going through phases. But the moon is always there. The moon is always whole. And I think that's like a really beautiful metaphorical lesson, is that despite whatever phase we're in, despite whatever shadows we're traversing, despite whatever light and love and exciting things that we're harvesting from our cycle, despite all of those things, we are always inherently whole. And I wanted to share really quickly just 4 ways, or 4 phases, I should say, to working with the lunar cycle. And this is before getting into the astrology of each lunar cycle. This is before beginning like how to work with the new moon and how to do a new moon ceremony. And this is really before any of the more like magical stuff, which is super fun and super necessary, I think, you know, but I think there needs to be like a grounded understanding of the lunar cycle. And for me, I mean, this 4-phase journey has really been developed over trial and error. It came to me during the pandemic, and I worked with this phase, or these phases, over and over and over again as a way of introspection and integration and individuation, as Carl Jung would say. And it really took a lot of my time to really understand what it meant to work with the moon outside of the moon ceremonies, which are beautiful and I recommend them. But yeah, so that's just where this comes from, and I wanted to share that with you. So there are 4 phases, and I'm just going to name them all here for you, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into each of those phases. So the first phase is witnessing. The second phase is dismantling. And the third phase is transformation. And then the 4th phase is integration and embodiment. So we have witnessing, dismantling, transformation, integration, and embodiment. So let's get into it. Phase 1 starts with the understanding that the full lunar cycle is not just 2 days, right? Just how, for those of us who menstruate, how our menstrual cycles aren't just, you know, approximately 4 to 6 days. There's a whole cycle in there, and the moon is 29 and a half days, relatively. So it's learning in this phase 1 of witnessing how to hold the thread of awareness. That's what I call it holding the thread of awareness. How to hold the thread of awareness through the entire circle or lunar cycle without dropping it. So what does that mean? That means whatever phase we're beginning in, that's another perfect thing about this lunar cycle, is we don't have to wait for, you know, the new moon to come around. I mean, we can, and it's fun to work with the moon that way, but we don't ever have to start, you know, at 1. You know, it's not like a new week where we start on Monday. The new moon is, or the moon is all about just like diving in where you are and seeing what's going on. You know, you don't have to wait any longer. So you can choose to wait if you want and start on the new moon, or you can start wherever you are right now, whatever phase the moon is in, and you can just learn to track the moon. So the moon changes, you know, gradually over 29 and a half days. And so as we're witnessing, sometimes we can do this in one cycle, one lunation. Sometimes the phase of witnessing can take a lot of different cycles or many moon cycles, because developing awareness can be tricky depending on our circumstances. Maybe we are moving through a lot of transition, and so it's just really hard to stay aware. Maybe, you know, there's a lot of loss going on in our world, and it's really hard to, you know, not drop the thread of awareness and get sucked into that, you know, atmosphere for a while. So wherever you're at, know that it doesn't have to just be one lunar cycle that you work through these phases with, but it can be many. And you should go at your own pace. But for this video, I'm just going to talk about doing it in one lunar cycle, but please feel free to make it your own. So really, witnessing is all about, you know, tracking the moon cycles. Maybe you draw it. I like to draw it on my whiteboard, but if you want to draw it in your journal, or if you want to paint it, you know, just get an app or look it up on Google every couple of days. Kind of like come into like, what is the lunar cycle? How many phases are there? There are 8 primary phases. And like just start to get used to like following it through new moon to new moon, waning gibbous to waning gibbous, like wherever you start. And if that starts to feel good, then begin to witness and notice not just the phases of the moon as you live day to day, but also maybe writing down or painting or whatever, like however you like to express yourself. Maybe like writing down some of your thoughts, some of your feelings, any significant things that happen to you throughout the day, and just start tracking not just the moon, but now you're tracking your behavior. You're tracking, you know, the events of your day or your month. You're tracking your feeling state, anything that comes up, your triggers, whatever it is you want to track, it's up to you. So phase 1 is all about witnessing. And an important note here is that when we witness, we are developing more present consciousness. So we are almost kind of like distilling consciousness into a very like pure state where we're just being present with what is, absent the judgment. So for a lot of us, when we start to like get into our stories, or we start to, you know, witness and track and record what's going on within us, we can get hyped up into our story. But just remembering and trying to practice in this phase, just to witness it with wonder, with curiosity, and be like, like that's what's here today, and I'm not gonna fix it. I'm not gonna, you know, jump into the doingness and the changingness of it right now. I'm just going to witness it as it is. This is a really, really important part of the process. It's the ability to acknowledge without assigning judgment or meaning to whatever it is that we are experiencing in our lives. And I think that's a very empowering tool. With that, once you feel like you're able to like follow the lunar cycle and hold the thread of awareness throughout the lunar cycle, you can move on to phase 2 if you want. And phase 2 is what I call dismantle, because now we have a full lunar cycle of data, which we did last lunar cycle in the phase 1 of witnessing. And now we're in a whole new lunar cycle. And so this is kind of where recognition begins to come into the room. So we had awareness the first cycle, and now we have like recognition. It's almost like we're not just aware and we're not just full of knowledge anymore. We're like beginning to understand. It's the beginning to understand. now we're recognizing our awareness on a deeper level. And so in this recognizing, chaos can happen. And that's why I call this the phase of dismantling. Because when we dismantle something consciously, we're taking apart, we're getting curious about the inner workings of what's going on. And so this is where the introspection piece comes in. It's like, okay, we have the awareness, and now we're going to dive just a little bit deeper. So as we continue practicing, cycle awareness and holding the thread of awareness alive through this next phase, we're now recording how we're feeling in this moment on this particular phase. And then before we're done, we're going to look back at our journal or wherever we recorded it at the same phase of the last lunar cycle. And we're just going to see if there's any patterns developing. Maybe there are no patterns developing. Maybe you're feeling totally different from what you were feeling in the first cycle. There is no right or wrong answer here. But when I work with my clients and when I was doing this, I did discover that during certain phases of the moon, there were certain feelings or reoccurring thoughts or even, excuse me, a little burpy today, or even behaviors or experiences that I had that were very similar to the exact time of the last lunar cycle. And so for me and for my clients, it begins to establish this oh, there's a pattern here, and I'm recognizing it, and I'm beginning to understand that maybe I'm working on autopilot in certain areas of my life. So there's a really big chaotic swirl that can happen in phase 2. And like I said, if phase 2 feels like a lot of unraveling, feel free to make it a couple different moon cycles. Don't rush the process. Like I said, I've worked with this process, each phase, over years. So really don't rush the process. So as you're going through phase 2, where you're dismantling, you're going to begin to recognize the places in the lunar cycle that are the same, that are different, that maybe you tend to always, drop the thread of awareness, or you tend to always overgive at or near the full moon, or you tend to be burnt out at or near the full moon. You're going to begin to recognize the patterns of your life. And it's very tempting in this phase to go into, what do I do? How do I fix it? I can see that this is a pattern. I don't want to do it anymore. But I really recommend, once again, just diving deeper into that witness consciousness, being non-judgmental and being super curious, and just continuing to jot down and notice. So phase 2 is a little bit deeper of phase 1, where you're still not really acting on any change yet, but you're becoming very clear on what's going on in your life on repeat, cycle and cycle and cycle again. So depending on how many cycles you feel like doing that, for some people, they have a lot of awareness and it's pretty easy and they're ready to jump into the transformation. For others, for myself, sometimes it kind of depends on the time of my life. I really have to practice those 2 phases diligently over 3 or 4 months, just because I need the extra support. Like I said, no judgment. But when you're ready and you feel very clear and you can recognize some of the patterns that are happening in your life, and you can hold that thread of awareness, it's time to step into phase 3, which is all about transformation. It's all about change. And it should be fun. Okay? So we're doing this because it should be fun and it should be exciting and there should be wonder and, love at the root of all of it. So we're not doing this as a practice of changing ourselves because we don't like ourselves. We're doing this as a practice of deep recognition of who we've been and choosing, if we want, who we want to become, where we want to go, with a lot of intention and a lot of love. And so once again, we're going through another lunar cycle in 29 and a half days, 2 weeks of waxing, 2 weeks of waning. And the reason I'm not yet talking about each individual phase is because the foundation for working with the lunar cycle is really about getting into the lunar cycle. And so I like to practice the first 4 phases, each a lunar cycle or more, before I start to deepen into what each phase means. Because while things can have symbolic meaning, and while symbols and metaphors really help us understand the world better, it's not dogma and it's not big T truth. It's just a way to help us orient. And so really getting your feet underneath you first so that you can start to feel into what's true for you matters more than knowing what, generally speaking, the new moon means in any manifestation culture. So we'll get into that in another video, but for now we're just talking about the lunar cycle awareness. So phase 3, transformation, going through another lunar cycle. You're going to keep doing what you were doing during the first and second lunar cycle. You're going to keep following that thread of awareness, making sure that you're in whatever capacity, journaling if that's what it is for you, video recording, whatever it is, you're still maintaining the thread of awareness. But this time, this is where right before the new moon, so we're talking about as you come into the new moon from the waning balsamic, you're going to review the last 2 months. Maybe it's an hour of your time, maybe you make it a whole thing. Don't overthink it. You're just going to review, you're going to reread, re-acknowledge, and you're just going to sit with what's working, what do I love, what do I appreciate about myself, what can I acknowledge about myself, how have the last 2 cycles been for me. So give yourself time to do that. And then you're going to step into intention making or dreaming. And you're going to ask yourself, what do I wish was different? Where are the places I want to grow? What are the things that I want to do differently this time? Are there places in this lunar cycle where I could be showing up more, or I could be resting more? Get very clear and curious about what you want to create and what you want to experience in this next lunar cycle. And then set that down, take some time, reward yourself, enjoy being human. And then come the new moon, you'll pull that paper up, review it, and then ask yourself what your intention is for this next lunar cycle. And so when I say intention, what I mean is a felt statement of who you want to be. So it may come with a goal as well, I want to write a book, or I want to publish my book, or I want to make $2,000 more, or I want to gain more clients, or I want to, whatever it is, you know what goals are. So instead of a goal, it's going to be an intention. And this is a feeling statement about who you're wanting, desiring, yearning to become, who you feel yourself to be, and what that feels like deep inside. So that looks like taking a breath with yourself, maybe kind of doing a drop-in meditation like we did at the beginning of this video, and getting clear on what do you want to feel like? What do you want to feel as you journey through the lunar cycle? Like I said, it can come with a goal, but really focus on that feeling statement. And then allow yourself to feel it, whatever that means. So if you need to write it down and then you need to do a meditation, or you need to dance, or you need to go on a walk, like how can you get that feeling state in the tissues of your body? So we're not just conceptualizing like, I want to feel happy, you know, like I want to feel alive, you know, whatever it is, like bring it down, breathe with it, and notice in your body where you feel that word that you're saying, and then stay with that feeling for just a couple of minutes. And then write it down, write down where you notice it in your body, and then the lunar cycle begins. And so where transformation comes from in the context of this like phase and this lunar cycle is holding the thread of awareness, right? But this time we're holding the thread of awareness and it's tied to our intention. And so we've basically planted our seed at the new moon, and we've said, this is what I want to feel, this is what I want to experience. We had a felt experience about it. We got out of the mind and into the body. And what's going to happen over the next 29 and a half days is you're going to gently, lovingly, and non-obsessively check in on this intention throughout the different phases of the cycle. And this can mean, you know, reviewing it. It can also mean doing some affirmations every couple of phases. It can mean meditating with it. But essentially what you're trying to do is make sure that you don't forget the intention that you set 29 and a half days ago by the time the lunar cycle is over. So you're really working to, wherever you go in your life, work, love, partners, parenting, whatever you're doing in your life, that you make sure that as you move through your life over the next 29 and a half days, you're checking in with that intention, you're feeling it in your body, and you're asking yourself, is this in alignment with my intention? Is this compatible with my intention? And then continue acting from that space if yes, and if no, this is where the transformation happens. You must course correct, because what happens is we set an intention at the new moon, and then we go back to living the way that we've always lived. And what happens? Come the full moon, or even the next new moon, we're like, I don't even remember what my intention was. And that's because we can't just set an intention and then like have wishful thinking, right? We have to set the intention and be diligent and deliberate about watering the seeds, about caretaking the seeds, the soil, as it grows, as it matures over time. And that means checking in with what is now our North Star. Our intention becomes our North Star during this phase, this cycle. And it's that subtle, it's like a very subtle doingness. So this isn't like big stuff that you're doing out in the world. It's subtle. You're coming inward. You're taking a moment with yourself, placing a hand on your heart or on your belly or anywhere, and just saying like, what was my intention? Feeling it. What was I about to do? Can I do it from this felt sense? Is it still in alignment? And if it is, then you do that thing. And if it's not, you course correct. You simply, try your best to not get sucked into the drama or the gravity of the external world, because it will pull you there. It will pull you out. And that is what the lunar cycle is all about. It's about bringing you back into your truth, into what's important to you, into filling your cup up so that you can go and fill the cup of whoever you love, whoever you're responsible for in your life. But you can only do that if you are so present with yourself. And what tends to happen with myself and my clients in the past is that we experience burnout, and we experience a lackluster life, and we experience feeling, resentful, or just burnt out, or just like small and insignificant, because we're not doing the thing that our soul wants us to do. And we're saying yes to things that we shouldn't be saying yes to, and we're saying no to the things that we should be saying yes to. And this practice of transformation in phase 3 really shows us how staying true to our intention is a very subtle and clear way of keeping ourselves on track, of keeping ourselves from self-abandoning, from removing ourselves from what's important to us, from displacing our soul from our body and having a disembodied experience. So transformation, phase 3, is big if you let it, if you allow the lunar cycle to really work you. And this is where a lot can come up for people. This is where shadow work gets really important. This is where learning how to have good self-care is really important. Really, really important is learning how to have boundaries that allow you the space to give yourself what you need, especially for those of us who have parents. We all have parents. Especially for those of us who have kids, right? So it's learning how to listen to ourselves and be true to ourselves and show up for the work. Because once we say, this is who I want to be, everything starts to change, because the universe says, okay, but if that's what you want, this has to change. And so we have to listen to that, and we have to walk through whatever is falling away. Because in any transformation, there is falling away. But the new moon and the full moon and the whole lunar cycle teach us that as we grow in light, and as we, wane or shed in light, it just starts again. So there's no need to fear whatever is falling away, because what's falling away, if it's true to what you're going for, is going to birth a better reality for not just you, but for all of your relations. And so that is phase 3, transformation. And I really recommend, if you set an intention and you kind of drop it from time to time, keep practicing it, and start with something small. It doesn't need to be I'm gonna create world peace, or I'm gonna publish my book, especially if you haven't even started your book. Be very curious, set something that seems fun, that is exciting, rather than terrifying. And then we come to phase 4, which is integration and embodiment. My lips are so dry. Okay, so integration and embodiment is all about surrender. It's all about letting go and putting it down for a time, to get off of yourself, to no longer be on yourself about being better or growing or transforming or tracking. It's really about taking time to be grateful. So at the next new moon, you'll simply set an intention, or you'll simply just be grateful. You'll just be give thanks for the whole process that you went through in the last 3 or 6 or however long you did this journey for. Just set an intention to be grateful and to receive insight and to receive whatever integration that you need over the next lunar cycle, so that you can begin to live a more integrated and embodied life. Because it's not just about transforming and transforming and transforming again. We transform to enjoy the being that we become. So phase 4 it's very subtle, but it's all about surrendering. So this means don't really track the moon. I mean, you can track the moon if you're enjoying it, but don't really set an intention. Don't really do all this hard stuff. Don't do all of the practices and the ceremonies and the stuff from a doing action, a doing force. Instead, if you do it at all, do it from being receptive and joyful about all you've changed, all you've come to know, all that you've lost, all that you've gained, and really start to kind of come into just settling into the new pace, the new foundation, the new roots that are here. Because so often in individuation, in introspection, and in our like spiritual journeys, we transform, you know, because we've done this work over time. And then we feel a little shaky. We're like, ooh, I'm not really sure, like something feels off. Well, something feels off because you've never been this version of yourself before. And it still might be a version of you that's becoming another version of you, but it doesn't mean that it's not something to celebrate and something to enjoy along the way. And then so you can have that be like a whole lunar cycle. You can have that integration period be 2 or 3 lunar cycles. It's whatever feels good for your soul. And then if you feel like it, you begin again. And that's how I work with the lunar cycle, just as a way to get very clear on what my rhythm is. Because I know in my life, I've had a tendency in the past to be a people pleaser. And I would lose my rhythm to the rhythm of my employer or my partner or my partner's kids or my parents or, you know, just like the world, even my friends. And not because they were doing anything, but it was because I just wasn't strong enough in my own, I wouldn't say strong enough, but I wasn't clear enough in my own rhythm to trust that that could support me. You know, that I was worthy and lovable and enough just as I was in my own rhythms. You know, and so this lunar cycle awareness practice really has brought me into deeper forms of integration and coherence, not just with myself and my own cycles, but with deepening my relationships and presence with other people. And I just think that's like such a huge gift. So that's how I like to, well, I don't work with the moon like this all the time anymore because I've done it for so many years, but this is how I like to teach my new clients. This is like the foundation, because I really do feel like it gives us the footing we need, especially if we've walked through or been practicing self-abandonment in the past, or people-pleasing, or having, you know, holy boundaries, if we haven't been very good at holding to our own truth. And so that's what a lot of my clients come to me for. And this is the foundation that I give them, among other things. And then from this space, when we have our ground and we feel comfortable in like the lunar phase, then we get into the like more magical, fun, esoteric parts of it. We bring in the astrology, we bring in like the symbology around the new moon and the full moon. We start to talk about life and death and birth and rebirth, and it's all just really fun. It's all good stuff. So I wanted to share that with you because I really do feel like the lunar cycle is more than the new and full moon, and there is this wave of awakening happening, especially for women. And I just feel like a lot more people are doing moon ceremonies or doing moon rituals or more aware of the moon, and I'm so passionate about the moon. She's been like a super big guiding force in my own life and my own journey, and I love bringing that to my clients. And I just wanted to make a video on it because I just love the moon and I'm obsessed with the moon. Thank you for breathing with me at the start. And if you're interested in doing any lunar cycle journeys together, you can visit the link down below and we can get started. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful lunar cycle.